Okay, so good morning, students. We'll continue again with our unit number 3, which is design of industrial building. So today we'll discuss about lattice trusses. Before proceeding, we should know what is the lattice truss. So lattice truss, it is an infrastructural design component and it is used in construction applications. So it consists of interlaced cords that are cross-linked horizontally and diagonally to provide stability and also to support a structure. And since there is a multiple structural members and hence there is a corresponding increase in the number of corners that is present in a single lattice structure. So lattice trusses are more prone to corrosion, and sometimes this corrosion may go unnoticed. And lattice truss, it also provides increased structural ability. And this increased structural ability comes due to its dispersion of forces, and it is typically designed with more unit members than are required. So the total forces of a lattice truss, it depends on the individual forces and stiffness of each member, in addition to the equilibrium conditions. So long span industrial buildings can be designed with lattice trusses using CH or O sections. So lattice trusses tend to be a beam and column structures and are rarely used in portal frames. Lattice structures are rarely used in portal frames. So various configurations of lattice trusses are illustrated in figure 11. Various configurations are illustrated in figure 11. So this is your figure number 11. Yes. Okay. So in this case, the two generic forms are W or N bracing arrangements. Stability is generally provided by bracing rather than rigid frame action. So here, for figure 11, the load stability is provided by bracing rather than giving a rigid frame section. However, columns can also be constructed in a similar way as illustrated in figure 13 in order to provide in-plane or internal stability. So we'll go to figure 13. This is your figure 13. This one. Various forms of lattice truss used in industrial buildings. Lattice girder in W form, N form, pitch form, then articulated, curved, again curved, but this time it has a canopy beneath, then articulated in the shape of a bow, and monopitch lattice girder with canopy again. So however, columns, okay, it provides internal stability. So using lattice structures, a comparatively high stiffness and load-bearing resistance can be achieved while minimizing material use. So when we have the objective or plan to minimize the material, then we use lattice structures as it provides a comparatively high stiffness and load-bearing resistance. Besides the ability to create long spans, lattice structures are attractive and enable simple service integration. Lattice structures provide simple services, and also it is found to be attractive despite of it providing long spans to the structure. A pin structure is an idealization used in design. So moment resisting connections can be designed using bolted or welded connections. So the resulting additional internal forces are accounted for in the design of the lattice members, where the lattice truss acts to stabilize the building against lateral loads. So whatever consequent or resulting additional internal forces which will be accounted or which will be developed in the design of the lattice members, in there the lattice truss acts as acts to stabilize the building against lateral loads. Next, suspended structures. So by using suspended structures, long-span buildings with high visual and architectural quality can be realized. Long-span buildings where the vision or the visual quality is very high and also the architectural quality is very good. In that cases, we use suspended structures. So the division into members that are predominantly subjected to either tension or compression permits the design of lightweight structures. So the member division in the suspended structures are subjected to tension or compression forces, and it permits the design of the lightweight structure. So however, structures that save on materials used do not necessarily lead to economic solution. So it is clear that if we have a low economic cost or low economic spend on materials, it does not mean that spending less on materials does not mean that it is providing us proper economic solutions. So this in figure 14, it is a lattice truss using tubular members as it is in the form of tubes. Next is lattice frame using lattice columns. These are the lattice columns. Then, particularly in space structures, the joints may be very complex and more time consuming to construct and install. So, the structures which have more space, the joints provided therein will be very complex, and it will also be time consuming to construct and install the same. So therefore, possible applications of this type of structure are industrial buildings that also serve architectural purposes rather than merely functional buildings. Therefore, such type, that is for space structures, are usually applied in the case of industrial buildings and not on many other buildings, because in industrial buildings they serve the architectural purpose and not just the functional purpose of the buildings. So suspended structures can be designed by extending columns outside the building envelope as illustrated in figure 16. So figure 16, I think it is in the next slide. Suspended structures accomplish longer spans, although the suspension cables or rods also penetrate the building envelope and can be obstructive to use of the external space. So suspended structures, it accomplishes or it achieves longer spans. Even though the suspension cables or rods, it penetrates through each other in the building envelope, and it can be obstructive and to the use of external space. So lattice and suspended structures are, in short, are very complex structures. Next, fire safety. So even though the general context of fire safety regulation is the same throughout Europe, but national differences do exist in other countries. For example, a single-story industrial building in the Netherlands with a compartment size of 50 into 100 meter has no requirements concerning fire resistance, whereas in France, a fire resistance of 30 minutes is required in many cases, and in Italy, the requirement is possibly as high as 90 minutes. So as the design stage, the following fire safety issues should be addressed. Means of escape, that is the number of emergency exits, characteristics of exit signs, and number of staircases and width of doors. So in the design stage, the following following 5 points should be considered while uh, creating or building up safety measures in a building. The first one is the route of escape or the means of escape. The primary concern should be of the number of emergency exits, then the characteristics or features of exit signs, that is mandatory, and the number of staircases and the width of doors. Next, the fire spread, including fire resistance and reaction to fire. Number 3, smoke and heat exhaust ventilation system. 4. Active firefighting measures including hand extinguishers, smoke detectors, sprinklers, planned fire brigade. And last one is access for the fire brigade. So fire resistance requirement should be based on the parameters influencing fire growth and development. And this includes risk of fire, that is the probability of the occurrence of fire, then fire spread, fire duration, fire load, and severity of fire. Number two, ventilation conditions, which includes air input, smoke exhaust. Number three is fire compartment, that is the type of fire compartment, the size of fire compartment, the geometry of the fire compartment. Next, type of structural system, then evacuation conditions, safety of rescue team, risk for neighboring buildings, active firefighting measures. The new generation of European regulations allow, in addition to performing fire tests at three levels of fire design calculations. So these three levels are: level 1 is the classification of structural components by using tables. Level 2 is simplified calculation methods. Level 3 is advanced calculation methods. So your weekly assignment 2 will be to write about the fire safety regulations in general context about India. I'll drop the question in the chat box. You can note it down along with the last date of submission. Also, now you can give your attendance in the chat box. Thank you. Those who have given the attendance in the chat box can leave the class. Thank you.